really...
COVID, I didn't deal with it well, to be honest. But I'm glad it happened because it was interesting. And it exposed so much corruption that would have been hidden for so much longer if it didn't happen. I feel the same way.
How broken our fucking healthcare system
Exactly.
is.
And I feel the same way about Trump. If that didn't happen, so much corruption would have been hidden for so much longer. But here's my point. So that's why I'm like pro-Trump.
No,
I'm pro-Trump and pro-COVID.
Oh, fuck Trump.
Pro-COVID. Pro-COVID. Yeah. And fuck you. Okay?
That's fine.
Okay, COVID killed more people than Trump. I'm pro-COVID. I'm glad it happened. Because
I've been taking supplements to tighten my sphincter, so you try.
I still get vaccinated 12 times a day. Here's my point. I like these things happening because it exposes corruption that otherwise would have been hidden. It's interesting. We need vehicles like this to expose that type of malfeasance.
Stiff and unyielding like the used Kleenex in a freshman dorm room. This is the New World Order broadcast, coming to you live from the end of the world.
That's right. Not only am I stiff and unyielding, I am constantly erect and upright. This is the New World Order broadcast. We are coming to you live from the end of the world. I am your host, the Hatman. Here's your other host, Talking Head, number 5. And here is your other host, Harry, the Taxman. So what did you think about that Jon Stewart being back, man?
I think it's funny because I don't know how long they're going to have him back. And he's only doing it one day a week. So it's just Mondays for Jon Stewart. He's doing like a very Howard Sternian kind of thing where, like, you know, how Howard, as he's gone on, like...
Yeah, I think Howard does like 3 days a week now.
Yeah, something like that. Like, because I know he went for 5 days a week.
Then he went to 4, then he went to 3, then I stopped listening.
Yeah, and well, I don't have a serious radio subscription because, in all honesty, like... While
my friend, there are ways. Neither did I.
Well, while there are a lot of good channels on Sirius, I'm not going to like sit there and disparage Sirius as
no, but it's already antiquated technology.
It's turned into a situation where they should have figured out a different way to monetize it at this point. You know, if they wanted to actually sit there and keep it going in the capacity that it is. So, I think in the YouTube world, that Sirius radio subscription kind of feels like still having cable.
Yeah. It's antiquated. It's an antiquated technology and an antiquated business model. It no longer makes sense.
But, you know, so so Jon Stewart's back on Mondays only.
Okay.
And at the time of recording, which obviously this will come out a bit later, so he should have 3 episodes in the can, I believe, by the time this comes out. But it was definitely fun to see him back in the saddle, you know?
Absolutely.
Because I have missed that guy.
It was, and I think we talked about this on the last podcast, the way that I did end up in a little bit of a red bubble as far as the media that I consume. And I totally admit that. And I got the feeling that that's where I was going to end up when I started once again consuming media. So I was at the point where I didn't know anything that was happening in the news at all. And I've told this story before, but I was working as a photographer in the 2016 election. And I know a lot of people had a party and they were really into it and everything. And I thought it was interesting that Donald Trump was running, but I just knew about it. I didn't know how. I wasn't on the internet. I wasn't taking in any media whatsoever. I was in a blackout.
Yeah, you weren't watching the discourse in real time.
Nothing. I wasn't seeing how people were reacting. I saw none of the propaganda. And so election day passed, and I ended up back at work the next day. I didn't know that it was election day. And I walk into my job, and they're talking about the election. And I go, oh, yeah, who won? I forgot it was last night. And they all laugh at me. They go, hey, yeah, right. like I'm making a joke. Like, I'm not joking. I literally don't know. So I was that level of blackout with the media. Now, what got me to start consuming media again is that I was living in a city under siege from riots for literally 3 days before I knew anything was going on.
I was during the George Floyd protests.
The George Floyd protests. I was in Philadelphia. There were buildings on fire.
Yeah, because you came to stay with me because it got within a few blocks.
6 blocks.
You were. Yeah.
And it had been going on 6 blocks from me for 3 days before I even knew anything was happening. And yeah, I got the hell out of Dodge at 4 o'clock in the morning. I waited till 4 o'clock in the morning because I didn't want to get stopped by a group of people and have my car flipped or something. So 4 o'clock in the morning, I headed over to you in Jersey, and you live in the suburbs.
Yeah.
So I started consuming media again because I realized not knowing what's going on in the world at all
is dangerous.
Living in such a volatile time. Like, you could have gotten away with that in the 80s and the 90s. Now you can't. It's actually dangerous. So I did start to consume media again, but I was like, well, I don't trust all of these, what we nowadays call legacy sources. So the only people who, because the legacy media is largely liberal, and anything that pretends to be opposing that, Fox, is just another hand of the uniparty. I was like, I don't trust any of this. So where do I go? And I knew instinctively I wasn't going to find anything that was like the way news used to be in the 70s, where they just told you what was going on. I knew I wasn't going to find anything. So I was going to have to end up in a little bit of a red bubble. And I was just going to have to, turn my filters on high and try to pull the bullshit out of it.
See,
but go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I feel like the legacy media, you can trust it to give you facts, but not a narrative that's correct.
I don't know, man. There were buildings on fire 6 blocks away from me, and they were still saying mostly peaceful protest. And I was like, if I was watching this on the news, I wouldn't be as scared as I should be. I was watching videos on Twitter. Remember we went on Twitter to keep track of it because the news wasn't reporting what was actually happening. Not in bullet time. There was a monster truck that ran over cops at an intersection. There were protesters throwing bricks at groups of cops. The cops are literally running away. You're seeing all these fucking videos on Twitter. You can't even find that shit online nowadays, but we were watching it in real time. So I mean, the mostly peaceful protests sacked a Starbucks today, and South 42nd Street. I've been like, oh, I'm fine. That's far away. Literally 6 blocks away from me, there were buildings on fire. I didn't fucking know about it. So no, I don't agree with you. If I had trusted the legacy media with that type of information, I would have been led to believe I was safe, and I was definitely not safe. And that's how I ended up in a little bit of a red bubble. But Jon Stewart coming back. Holy shit. What a breath of fresh air. What an amazing episode of The Daily Show. That was fantastic.
No, it had higher viewership than they've had in years. Yeah.
Trevor Noah's not great.
I've got no beef with Trevor Noah. Jon Stewart's a one-of-a-kind person. He's
brilliant.
It's got nothing to do with anything else that's going on in this show. It's like, I know it takes a lot of people to sit there and make that show work.
Jon Stewart's perspective and the way that he make sure that you're understanding where he's coming from without making it seem bias is brilliant.
Well, and that's the funny thing is
he's just an excellent communicator.
Oh yeah, and he's really good at making things make sense to the point where you have to question yourself if you're not agreeing.
Then that's what comedy should do. But he's taking those comedic skills and he's doing it. You know what I mean? Like, if you laughed at that, but you disagree with it, that's something about you. Why is it funny if you did? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
he's using those skills to communicate articulate points to bring you around to his point of view of the way he sees this cultural dynamic. And he cuts through so much bullshit so quickly and so concisely. Not a lot of people can do that.
See, I thought the funny thing is that after it had aired, I sat there and watched clips from it and everything, and thought it was like going into a time warp and sitting there and getting to be back there where he was in his prime, because he's still razor sharp. And just to sit there and then all of a sudden because I watch that stuff, YouTube sits there and starts suggesting me like podcasts that are sitting there and dissecting what he did. Okay. And like I ended up with like very left-leaning podcasts and stuff like that, where this married couple who does a podcast was sitting there and talking about how he's obviously out of it and past his prime, and that like there's no like things are too serious now for somebody like Jon Stewart.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And and like I listened to the whole podcast.
So you gave him the benefit of the doubt.
Well, just because I wanted to know, because I was like, this is completely different from what my experience of that was. Mm-hmm. And nothing they said resonated with me. It seemed like it was this weird towing the party line thing.
Of course.
Where they were mad at him for making fun of Biden's age. And it's like, guys, Biden's fucking like Trump's old as shit too. Mm-hmm. And he brings that up. Mm-hmm. And like one of his biggest points was he says there's like, they set the record for the oldest presidential candidates, only breaking the record that they themselves set 4 years ago.
Exactly.
And it's like, why? And his point was, why do we have these ancient fucking people trying to run a government that like this is ludicrous? And even like the press conference where Joe Biden...
No offense, Harry. I think you'd make a great president.
I don't think you're. No, but it was a funny thing where it's like all of his points were salient, and even like where he's rooting for Joe Biden, obviously. And he's sitting there, he's like, and Joe Biden goes to walk away in that clip that he's playing of that press conference. He's like, yeah, you fucking nailed them. And then he sees that like somebody asks a question that makes him come back. He's like, no, don't come back. Don't come back. You know, it's like, I feel like for me anyways, as a left-leaning person, like I'm registered with the Democratic Party, but that's just because I want to be able to vote in the Democratic primaries, because those are the people who supposed to prescribe to what I would like to see the direction of the country go. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to register with them because I don't care who wins the Republican primary. They're probably not going to align with me well. Mm-hmm. Whereas, yeah, Joe Biden's going to sit there and end up on the ticket, but if I can vote in the Democratic primary to get a better candidate in, I want to have that ability. Mm-hmm. And that goes into the entire thing that I've touched on before about how our voting system is stupid and we should adopt a voting system that makes more sense. But all of that aside.
Right. But Jon Stewart doing what he did, and then first of all, your mistake was watching a podcast that was done by a married couple. So there's only one podcast in history that's tolerable that's done by a married couple, and that's...
You're going to go Weinstein on it.
That's Dark Horse of Bret, Weinstein, and Heather Hine. I'm sorry. That's actually a great podcast. Other than that, can you imagine a married couple having a good dynamic? And I understand this is the worst podcast in the world, and we have 0 100%. Views, and we've been doing this for like 4 months. I get it. But can you imagine a married couple? Who's going to watch that? So that was your first mistake. But... yeah, obviously it's not going to resonate with you because you're smart, and it's obvious to you when people are saying things that are simply towing the party line.
Well, they're being genuine about it is the thing that weirds me out.
Or they look like it. Who knows? I mean, I agree with you. They probably are. They are. Their brain is probably 100% corrupted by some sort of religious ideology.
Well, and the funny thing is, so that's one of the other weird things about this, and I forget the name of the podcaster. I would sit there and say it just so that, you know, our non-viewers would know what I'm talking about. But, but the funny thing is that not only are they liberals, but they're very Christian liberals.
Is that a thing?
Oh yeah, there's plenty of Christian liberals.
Yeah.
But so it was really weird to hear their perspective about, oh, he shouldn't be making fun of Joe Biden's age. It's like, have you seen that motherfucker recently? And it's like, don't get me wrong. If it's Trump or Biden, I'm voting Biden day and night.
Okay.
But like, only because those are my only fucking options.
And I think to Jon Stewart's point, why are these our only options?
Exactly, and that's how I feel. So
isn't this the conversation we should be having? Why are these?
Why do we have octogenarians fucking running for the White House?
Why are these our only two options? It's so I thought he did a fantastic job. And the first major point that he brought up was that whole thing that was a scathing indictment of Biden. For and then he for losing his memory during the deposition.
Yeah, and then brings up the depositions of the entire Trump
seems
family,
like, and he goes,
seems like depositions cause.
It seems like the main thing that causes memory loss is depositions.
Yeah, exactly.
See, I get Yahoo News things emailed to me constantly because I have a Yahoo account. And I never read them anymore because like it's obvious they're so partisan. But one thing I was like, wait a second, that's a headline? Oh, somebody scathing of Biden? Okay, well that's out of the narrative. Let me check that out. And I read through the whole article that Yahoo News posted, and I was like, and that's the conclusion I came to. It's like, yeah, he's being deposed. That's what you do.
Because if you say, I have no memory of this, you're not perjuring yourself.
That's the safest route to go. So I came to the same conclusion. Then the second excellent thing that he did, what was the other thing? I was like, right on, man. I can't remember. But then the way that he ended it perfectly
was you need to deal with this every
day.
Hey,
listen. Yeah, that was okay. So that's great. The line that he ended on. Go ahead and say it.
Oh, it was just like whatever happens November 5th. If your guy wins, the country's not out of danger.
If you want to make the world, if you want to make the world a better place, that's a job that you have to do
every
day, not once every 4 years. The thing that he said, I guess it was before that. Then I'm misremembering it. Is if Trump scares you that badly, we need to be having a conversation about Biden's age. We need the best candidate to run against him. This needs to be it's more important because of who he's up against. And I was like, fucking finally.
Exactly.
A breath of fresh air. Jesus Christ. Harry, you saw the Jon Stewart thing, didn't you? The new Daily Show?
Yes, as far as I'm concerned, Biden belongs in a nursing home, and Harris belongs in a hula house. And because
not partisan at all.
Not partisan at all.
He ain't worth a shit. Trump is still part of the system, and
I disagree with that.
And his partner stabbed him in the back. I don't care who you put in the White House; it's still controlled by the system.
Right.
His partner stabbed him in the back. Do you mean Pence for not sitting there and overthrowing the election?
As far as that George Floyd riots, I ain't running nowhere. Let them come here. They will pay a price that they will bleed. And if you think one person died, we're going to bring about 100 body bags, which that's what it's going to take.
You can rest assured that they will not come here because our public transportation system is so shitty. How would they fucking get here?
And that good stuff is still buried.
I mean, fair enough. I thought it was just Jesus Christ. That's where I used to get all of my news before.
Oh yeah, we would.
So after the Daily Show, that's when I went on media blackout. I was like, "There's nothing else."
Yeah, Jon Stewart left. How am I going to get my information?
I got really into Joe Rogan, but that's not like what you call bullet time news.
He doesn't have that kind of incisive mind either, and like he's
no, I like
I have no beef with him.
Skepticism, but he's not going to tell you what's going on. and here's where the bullshit lies in 20 minutes.
Sure.
That's not his model. Well, that's not what he does.
And it's not him as a person, because he doesn't retain the kind of information. Like, Jon Stewart's like a walking fucking encyclopedia of what's going on at all times. And it's one of those things where Joe Rogan will hear something from a pundit or somebody who he has on and be like, oh, Jesus Christ, man, I didn't even think of that. Jon Stewart will be like, no, wait a minute. You know, well, and that's why I've always respected, like, no, stop. You're building a stupid narrative here. And Joe Rogan likes to entertain wild things, and that's why I think his show is so popular.
Sure.
And
that's why I love watching it. But my point is, in order to figure out if there's a riot going on with your city without having to cringe the entire, like, for an hour every night, just like be in cringe mode, I can't do that sober. Sure. I can't do that drunk, let alone sober. So where do you go? I mean, if Joe Rogan hey man, don't you, with whatever guest he has on, hey man, don't you think it's wild what's happening in Philadelphia right now? I know I'm already 4 days into the riot. It's not that type of show. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I need something that's going to tell me, what's going on. Am I in any danger? Just to keep my finger on the pulse without spending every day in research. And Jon Stewart was my guy.
No, and I feel like he was that for like a generation of people.
He's incredible. What a great guy. So I thought, if there's a left-wing narrative going around now that Jon Stewart is
too centrist,
that's gonna end. He's gonna be called alt-right soon enough. That's what happened to everybody else. Or that he's out of touch because now things are too serious to joke about, and he shouldn't be joking about Biden's.
We've talked about this with what comedy is for, and the purpose of comedy. It's like it's the court jester being able to make fun of the king.
Of course, it's always been that,
and that's the function of comedy.
Yes.
And I feel like Jon Stewart is always perfectly performing his function.
Yes. In the political arena, especially.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, man, if you're going to sit there and say that he's behind the times are bullshit. And it's an illusion. And him cutting through it to a certain type of individual that's looking at the times, like the thing, him cutting through it is going to look like a dinosaur. Like, oh, he's so behind the times, man. He's like making fun of Biden.
He's not on our faction line.
We all came to a consensus that we have to prop Biden up in order to beat Trump. Like, that's not the best guy.
But
so him cutting through the bullshit looks to these assholes like, ooh, man, that's a little old fashioned.
Well, and that's the whole thing with me. It's like I'm liberal. That's what I am. That's just my viewpoint on the world. Is that like the kind of poisonous rhetoric that we spread around right now on both sides of everything is fucking stupid. But if I've got to sit there and pick somebody, I'm going to pick somebody who aligns with my values. And the whole thing is that I'm 100% with Jon Stewart. Biden should not be that guy. Like, dude, I didn't want to vote for him when I voted for him last time.
Let's start a campaign. Jon Stewart for president.
Oh my God. Everybody's been begging him to do that for fucking years.
Jon Stewart for president.
Who's for vice president?
Who's for vice president? Good question.
Who are you going to vice president to Jon Stewart?
There's no running mate. You're just setting Jon Stewart up to be assassinated by a CIA.
Maybe Jon Stewart for vice president?
Okay, so let's...
That way they can't kill the guy because they'll end up with somebody more dangerous.
Okay, so here's my proposition. And Bret Weinstein actually tried to do this on Twitter before Elon Musk bought it. He was trying to create a...
You mean X? Because everybody calls it X now.
Whatever. So he was trying to start...
I'm being facetious, but...
I gotcha. He was trying to start a party where you would take a presidential candidate and a vice presidential candidate would be paired up from the opposing parties. And create
That's
a third
how our
party
country started.
Okay. And I didn't know that. And create a party based on that. And he was deplatformed for doing that. So I think Trump for president, Jon Stewart for vice president. Let them take out Trump. They're left with Jon Stewart. Let's do it. Because they all want to take out Trump, and they're going to look at it and go, the CIA is going to go,
let's weigh our options.
The Orange Man is going to be near the grassy knoll, but we got Jon Stewart. I say we go for it. And that would make everybody happy.
I think they
would look at him as the less of two evils, and I think he would do.
I think if you put Jon Stewart and Donald Trump on the same ticket, you're guaranteeing the next presidential assassination. That's just my opinion.
That's what I just said.
Oh, I'm just saying, I'm agreeing with you.
The CIA would sit there and go, Trump's going to be near the grassy knoll, but we got Jon Stewart. Yeah, take Trump out.
With our luck, they'll hit his hair.
And then we'll end up with Jon Stewart as president, because even if they hit Trump's hair, he's going to recuse himself of the office.
Oh, of course.
He can't appear on camera with a bullet hole in his pompadour. Yeah, it's not going to work. So either way, we end up with Jon Stewart as president. I'd say that's the way to go. 2024, Trump Stewart. Let's do it.
It's actually reminding me of him and Colbert's, what was it, the March for Reason or whatever that they had.
Something like that. Yeah, I forgot.
Where they sat there and had a whole thing down in Washington, D.C. where they had like a big gathering and everything. Man.
So I think what Jon Stewart did coming back is needed and courageous.
And I think it's unifying is the funny thing. Because that's the thing that cracks me up about the weird like liberal podcast that I was seeing, where they were like, oh, he's out of touch. This kind of comedy doesn't play anymore. It's too serious now. It's like, first of all, comedy is always deadly serious, and most people don't realize that. And Jon Stewart is a deadly serious comedian. He's somebody who is going to make sure that he doesn't pull his punches, that he sits there and he, like, if you're doing something, saying something, portraying something that is fraudulent, stupid, that is something that is disingenuous.
I mean, he's the one that called out the Wuhan lab.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
On the Colbert Show. Thank God. Now we can talk about this, because Jon Stewart, such a powerful voice of the left, brought up how it's ridiculous that nobody's allowed to consider this publicly on a very popular show.
Yeah, and try canceling Jon Stewart.
Try. It's not going to happen. So now he gave everybody else permission to talk about it.
Hey, guys, if the Ukraine voted in a comedian for president...
It could happen here.
But isn't that laughable?
Why not?
Why not?
Robin Williams had a whole movie based upon that too. Maybe that was like a spin-off of what they did in the Ukraine, because Zelensky actually...
I would have taken Robin Williams for president. He was a very warm-hearted guy.
Absolutely, I would have taken him for president. But Zelensky used to be a comedian, and he starred in a movie about a comedian.
A TV show, I believe.
A TV show about a comedian who gets elected president.
Yeah.
Dude! Best thing in the world. I think. Good.
It started as a joke. I'll run for president.
Yeah.
Then he found out that people voted for him.
Dude.
And then he had second thoughts about it. Why are they voting for me? I made a joke out of it.
On the con end of things,
country is a joke.
Maybe it is. But
on the con end of things, we did have a reality TV show president. So...
Yep. Which was, I don't think it's a con. I think it's interesting. But that's just, my worldview doesn't really give a rat's ass as long as...
Yeah, you don't care about the outcome.
As long as it's interesting. Yeah, exactly. And it's exposing...
Outcomes aren't really...
COVID, I didn't deal with it well, to be honest. But I'm glad it happened, because it was interesting. And it exposed so much corruption that would have been hidden for so much longer if it didn't happen. I feel the same way.
How broken our fucking healthcare system
Exactly.
is.
And I feel the same way about Trump. If that didn't happen, so much corruption would have been hidden for so much longer. But here's my point. So that's why I'm like pro-Trump.
No,
I'm pro-Trump and pro-COVID.
Oh, fuck Trump.
Pro-COVID. Pro-COVID. And fuck you. Okay?
That's fine.
Okay, COVID killed more people than Trump. I'm pro-COVID. I'm glad it happened. Because
I've been taking supplements to tighten my sphincter, so you try.
I still get vaccinated 12 times a day. Here's my point. I like these things happening because it exposes corruption that otherwise would have been hidden. It's interesting. We need vehicles like this to expose that type of malfeasance. Now, if you want to save the country from the inevitable quasi-right-wing fascist religious dictatorship that's going to happen.
Just watch yourself with the table pounding. You're probably putting a lot of stuff through the mics. That's all I was saying.
I got it. If you want to save the country from that, next amendment to the Constitution. You cannot be president unless you were born in America. You're at least, 33, is it?
35.
35 years old. And you have been a successful comedian. Now, wouldn't that save the country automatically? Look at it in medieval terms. Who's the only person in the king's court during the monarchies that was allowed to poke fun at the king?
True.
Who's the only person in the court that was allowed to sit on the king's throne? Wear his crown. Tell him what the actual shit was. The function of the jester
was to tell the king how he was fucking up.
To keep the king in check.
Yeah.
Because the king is surrounded in a bubble where everybody wants to tell him how cool he is and how everything he's doing is right, because the only way to get ahead in a feudal system
is to suck the king's dick.
Suck the king's dick. The jester's function.
Got to kick him in the balls.
Got to kick him in the... Exact. Well said. So I say, you want to save the country, you have to have been a successful comedian. Let's say over $1 million a year gross. Touring.
Lenny Bruce for president.
Have you ever heard of Lenny
Bruce?
Bruce?
He told the truth.
Yeah.
Definitely of its time.
Oh, he was so ahead of his time.
Of its time.
Well, but what I'm saying is...
Oh, he was the first person to do that type of show. But what I'm saying is it didn't age well. But,
sure.
And not because what he says is controversial. It's just like... He's like, hey, man, you dig? Like that sort of thing.
I'll take Bill Hicks for president if he wasn't dead.
Bill Hicks for president! No, Jon Stewart. I think in order to run on the presidential or vice presidential ticket, you have to have been a successful comedian for at least 5 years with at least $1 million a year gross in touring sales on average. If you have done that, you have proved that you can make enough Americans laugh that you are now capable of running for office.
What about that guy Dice? Would he make a good president?
Andrew Dice Clay.
I would vote for Andrew Dice Clay. I've never voted for a president in my life. If Andrew Dice Clay ran, I would register immediately.
So I don't know what he's like these days.
Dice?
Yeah.
Oh, he's brilliant.
Oh, no.
So here's the joke. He's on Joe Rogan, and he brings in a smelly leather cap that he wore on his first arena tour. It smells. He never watched it. And he goes, Joe,
wash leather.
Hey, Joe, I know that you're a big fan of mine, and I wanted to give you a little gift. Here's the cap that I wore on my first arena tour, and he gives it to Joe Rogan. It's like total ego, and Joe Rogan, you can put it on. You can put it on. It's yours now. I'm giving it to you. It's a gift. And Joe's like, why does this smell like ass? Yeah, so he's like, but it's that's not Dice. That's the joke.
Well, because
him pretending
is a character.
Him pretending that Joe Rogan is such a fanboy, he's going to be in awe of this terrible gift. Dude, he's so... I would vote for him in a second. That's brilliant. What he did with Joe,
I gotcha.
You have to really be... it doesn't even look like a joke. Brilliant.
See, and that's the reason why so many people have begged Jon Stewart to run for president, is just because it's one of those situations where, he is to a certain extent unimpeachable. His character is unimpeachable.
Oh, yeah.
He is brutally fucking honest. He's always trying to do the best for everyone around him.
And sincere.
Yeah.
He believes what he believes.
Yeah.
And he's open to being wrong.
Oh, sure. And
a human being, not a robot. When's the last time we had one of those in power? Yeah, exactly.
But no, I like his return to the Daily Show. I even if he's just doing it on Mondays, I hope he does it till he fucking dies.
Well, at least for the election cycles.
No, I hope, because I love him.
I do. No, I know, but it's so important to have a voice like that right now, this year, because I've told you guys before. I think this year is going to hit the fan.
Yeah. I feel like he might feel like that because he was not wanting to come back before this.
And Harry and I have talked about this too. So I sent my cryptic New Year's text to everybody. I was in communion with entities that are totally visible, that are physical, that can call you on the phone. They are not ghosts or invisible at all. And
give them your credit card number, did you? Because I fell for that one.
If I ever am in communion with an alien or something that's communicating with me psychically and they ask me for my credit card number, that will send up a red flag.
Okay, good.
And then I will be wearing tinfoil hats.
You're not already under your current hat?
No, because I want to be communicated with. That's the whole point of the tinfoil hat, is they're getting in my head. But Harry also believes that 2024, this year, shit's about to hit the fan. This is when things are going to get real. Maybe I should read... Is that too far out there, that text that I sent to everybody on New Year's Eve? Is that too far out there?
That's up to you. I feel like it's going to make you seem out there. That's entirely your fault.
I don't care how I'm perceived. Nobody's watching anyway, except for our wonderful neighbor. Do you know that when I met that guy...
Rob, ?
Okay, I'll get his name. Duly noted. I'm a terrible neighbor. I get it. But the best compliment that he gave me is not only like, hey, man, I watch your podcast. It's nice to finally meet you. I was like, oh shit, you're the one?
Yeah, you're the one.
And then he goes, yeah, I was just watching the new one that you put up last night. I finally got it on and I fell asleep to it. I was like, oh, thank you so much.
Are we a SMR? Should we like kind of do the more dulcet tones and
No, I think we're fine. Okay. I think we're fine
because we could do this and
we could.
Hello, Robert.
Hello,
if that
Robert.
Is your name,
if that
because
is
we did not bother finding out, apparently.
Yes.
And I wasn't there, so I take absolutely no responsibility.
Thank you so much for helping us dig the Lincoln out of the snow.
It's very charitable of you. You're a wonderful neighbor,
yes.
And we would just like you to know.
I hope that the gasoline in the canisters that Harry gave you was less than 30 years old.
No because otherwise it becomes gelatinous and kind of can't work in an internal combustion.
Your snowblower might be fucked up.
A lot of people don't realize that about the apocalypse, is that you actually have to sit there and you can't use gasoline past a certain date. It's interesting.
Yes, it does have an expiration date.
But anyway.
But when he told me I fell asleep to it last night, I was like, "Aw, that's what I do with my favorite podcast." Like, if I am like, I need to hear somebody talking in the background in order, like, some nights you just want somebody talking.
Yeah, I actually, of course I sleep next to somebody else these days, so I can't do that. Oh, she snores. She
yeah, so do you. So you guys are just competing. Yeah, I've been there.
But my point is, like, yeah, but when I was sleeping in a bed by myself for years, it's like, oh yeah, I would fall asleep to Yahtzee Croshaw every fucking night because his dulcet British tones just...
So this gentleman across the street from the compound fell asleep listening to us the other night. That warms the cockles of my heart.
And they're so small.
They're almost non-existent and frozen over.
He's got the tiniest cock holes.
Where was I going with all this? Where was I going? We
were talking about Jon Stewart.
Yeah. Shit. Yeah, but then I was making fun of our podcast, and that's why I brought.
That's why we just eternally shitted on ourselves for a moment.
Yeah. What was my fucking point? What were we talking about? I'm not even that. I'm a little buzzed. I'm not even drunk yet. I just completely forgot what we were talking about.
I mean, we could always just stop the recording and listen to the past
I think we're going to
minutes.
have to, yeah. We're going to take a quick break. All right, so I remember why I got into making fun of our podcast and talking about our neighbor. Because if I want to say something that I did when I was half drunk and communicating with invisible entities, and you're going to, it might make you seem far out to anybody. Hey, to my neighbor, I'm pretty sure I already seem pretty far out to this guy. I walk around barefoot in the snow in a long black robe on a regular basis. If he hasn't seen that, he's going to eventually. That's who it is. That's who I am. So it's fine. So here's what I wrote, and I think this year is so important. New Year's Eve group text. 2024 is the last year that the human being thrives. Speciation will become a well-worn word. This is the end. One more year of nonsense and dreams, of rose-colored glasses. The last year of hope. Post-human and transhuman are about to become part of the normal, civilized, linguistic nomenclature beyond 2024. This is actually the first real year of action for the age of Aquarius. She is spilling out the water. Our mother is giving birth. And she says to all of us, all you know how to do is swim, little fish. What do you do when you are spilt upon the land? Thank you, AI. This is the last year of the human. Look back on it with fondness and live it to its fullest potential. The future is not yours. There is no dawn for man. Happy New Year. The last line of which I obviously stole from Lord of the Rings. Saruman said that.
I didn't know that Saruman said Happy New Year. That's weird.
But, I mean, that's the way I feel about where things are going. Harry agrees with me. You seem to agree as well?
I
just take AI. I think this year is going to be when we become, in some way, the human experience is about to become, the way that we've been doing it is about to become so irrelevant, an upgrade is going to be absolutely necessary.
I do feel like that there is a necessity for change that is palpable in the air right now.
I agree.
And I feel like that's one of those things where it's going to come down to who's got their hand on the wheel, so to speak.
No, everybody, this is the evolution that I foresee. Everybody has their hands on their own wheel.
Oh,
and we got to take our hands off each other's wheels. That's what I see as the major crux of what the AI revolution is all about.
It's just too many hands on wheels.
Too many hands on too many wheels, man. Control your own experience. Get out of everybody else's business.
I guess it's
appreciate.
I guess it's the liberal in me, but I feel like there's certain points of intervention that probably need to happen. But you know,
yeah, you break a law, and you hurt another person, you go to jail.
Oh no, I meant as far as building up the society, as it were. Like there's definitely measures that probably should be taken to sit there and push us into a new epoch.
This is an interesting conversation. We don't have to go into the Putin interview this podcast either. We could just start off the next podcast with that. I like where this is going. Let's have a conversation about that.
All right.
I'm gonna go into my relaxed posture so that I remember to listen rather than filibustering your ass, which is my wont to do.
Well, sure.
What do you think? And when you say things that have to happen, you're talking about necessarily top-down measures that would be from like a social engineering point of view?
Kind of more the top acknowledging a bottom up.
Okay, so what do you think has to happen in order to facilitate civilized growth before people get out of each other's hair and take their hands off each other's wheels, drive their own cars, and then appreciate what other people are doing that's different from what they're doing as unique rather than being antinomistic towards them?
So I think you'll agree with me on this. It's just the basic needs need to be met. The hierarchy of needs.
Oh, I agree with you 100%.
So like until our society can...
takes us out of a pressure cooker?
Yeah, exactly. Until our society gets us to the point where you will not die. You will, if you're sick, you will be taken care of. You will not starve, and you will have a place to live.
I think AI can make logical systems out of those problems. And if it can't now, we're getting to the point where it can, and it's going to be far more logical than what corrupt politicians and corporations are able to come up with.
And that's the biggest issue standing in the way of it, is that everybody's always like, oh, well, if we're going to give this to people, like you go back to the Reagan era with the concept of the welfare queen and stuff like that. It's like, it's about having your basic necessities met so that you can be a productive member of society. And then if you're a non-productive member of society, you just languish. It's like you can live until you die. That's fine. Like, I don't have a problem with the state taking care of a group of people who are not doing anything, because maybe they don't know what to do. Maybe you've failed them by not giving them opportunities, education, etc., etc. And it's like, so it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, like, everybody should be trying to contribute, but that's a generational thing where we've fostered a system in which certain people are hampered from contributing by the necessities of the pressure cooker, as you put it. So it's going to take years to rectify that, because it's going to have to be the kids who are coming up now who have their needs taken care of who will foster the future.
Let me galvanize what you're saying with my own perspective. I don't disagree with you, but let me put it this way.
Sure.
Which I think is a little more concise. Tell me if I'm leaving anything out. We live in a system where they're saying, hey man, we can't fix Detroit. We can't, it's too expensive. But then we're spending billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars on foreign wars. So you do have the money. You could do it. You could fix problems within our country. A rising tide raises all ships. And it's like Jordan Peterson says over and over again. If you want to fix problems, fix poverty. That's the first thing.
Yeah. And I will say that he does say that to his credit, because I'm not a huge Jordan Peterson
That's
fan,
irrelevant to the conversation, but that's the point that you're making.
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
I agree.
I agree
so let's galvanize it succinctly. That's what you're saying. If you're going to throw all this money that we don't have at these things that have really...
all this money that's not real.
It's not real at all. But then your excuse why our government can't help its own people is we don't have the money.
Yeah, we don't have the resources. No, it's because you don't want to. Mm-hmm. Because keeping this
pressure
dynamic
cooker
in place, sitting there and having it so that people like myself and you, who are perfectly willing to work and have no problem getting calluses on our hands, etc., etc., it's like you're not giving a pathway for us to be productive.
Well, there's
in a
no
way
incentive
that works for society.
There's no incentive. Yeah. There's no incentive. I mean, you can get a job nowadays where you're working 60 hours a week, making what's on paper good money, and still not be able to afford your own apartment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane.
I don't even get to own property.
Yeah. And on paper, you make good money, and you work sometimes literally 80 hours a week.
Oh, sure. I've gotten as high as 110.
But hey, listen. We need to help the Ukraine.
And my heart goes out to them for what they're going through. But the point is that all of this has turned into machinations to enrich specific groups of people who are already rich. They don't need it. And I'm not saying that, like, I'm not doing the communistic anti-Ayn Rand thing of like, oh, well, from each their ability to each their need.
No, I think you're coming across clearly.
I just wanted to spell it out for our non-viewers.
Hey, opportunity is being stripped away on purpose or not. It's being stripped away.
By the way, if we ever make a Patreon, I want the lowest monthly donation tier to be called non-viewers, just because we say non-viewers so much.
Yeah, you know what? Tim Dillon's highest Patreon.
Nah, go ahead.
It's called the Rothschild Circle.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's a good segue. I think that what Jon Stewart is doing is courageous. Now, I also felt the same way about what Tucker Carlson did with Vladimir Putin. Nobody else is doing it. And I think that that is the job of what a professional journalist is supposed to do. If you live in a free society with a free exchange of ideas, that's important. I found it extremely courageous that he just went ahead and did it. That was my take from it. I had a lot of takes from the interview itself that had really nothing that, but I'm so happy that at least one person in our media space had the guts and the conviction to go do what their fucking job is supposed to be. Thank God for that. I'm glad that it happened. And it shows that the Trusted News Initiative and all that fucking globalist bullshit still doesn't have absolute control over the information that is available to the American public. And it gave me a little bit of hope. A little bit.
So, about the interview, I hate Tucker Carlson.
I know.
The reasons why I hate him is because he's a performative clown shoe.
So am I.
As far as interviewing Putin, I told you when you asked me if I had seen the interview, which I hadn't at the time, and I have since.
And you also told, hey, I was wine drunk. You actually apologized to me the next day. You sent me a text. And I was like, we're good. You were like, I was wine drunk. I was like, you're fine. It's fine.
Yeah, but as far as the interview goes, it's like, it's difficult for me to formulate an opinion on it based on the fact that there's a lot of what Putin said that's just indisputable fact, and that's fine. And Tucker barely talked during the interview, which I think is a good thing. Like, he just let a head of state speak their piece, and I'm fine with that.
Mm-hmm. He was kind of in a catch-22 being in that situation, and Putin
because
was
I'm
filibustering the shit out of him as a power move.
I'm sure he had.
It's irritating.
I'm sure he had guidelines set in place where there were certain things he wasn't allowed to talk about.
Well, even if that's not the case, you're sitting down with Vladimir Putin in the world space the way it is now.
Sure.
And he wants to give you a 30, 40-minute history lesson on Eastern Europe. You can't stop him.
Sure.
You have to let that go.
The funny thing to me about that whole situation, though, is as I sat there and went through, because it's so my drive here is about 2 hours and 10 minutes. That interview was 2 hours and 6 minutes. So basically, that was my whole drive here. Was sitting there and watching the Putin interview.
Well, listen, man, I appreciate, and our neighbor across the street, our only viewer, appreciates the drive and the effort that you put into coming here and doing this. It's awesome. Anyway, go ahead.
But yeah, so the funny thing, upon watching that interview, it really laid bare to me, like this was my takeaway, was how much the entrenched politics of a country distort that country's actions and choices. Because
well, once again, it's the story.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
So it was interesting to me to listen to because most of what he said was accurate. There are points where I don't know what's accurate, and the whole thing that he keeps going off about in 2014, it's like, okay, so his big claim in the interview was that in 2014, an election was held, a person won, and then we somehow intervened to get a re-election to occur. And then it went to the person that it went to, and that was explicitly in our favor against Russia.
And that's something that I've heard talked about over and over again in the spheres that in the media that I consume. I have not bothered to look into the history of it. I do not consider that to be the finer point of the argument about the conflict that's happening. That's why I never looked into it. We all have limited time, and I want to enjoy myself.
Well, sure, exactly.
The finer point...
And apart from the fact that millions of our tax dollars are going to fund this, it really has nothing to do with us.
Hundreds of millions. The finer point, I think, about the conflict is that he told everybody, hey, here's the red line, NATO, no expansion beyond this point, and then we just, like, did it.
See, and those
That's weird.
Those are the things that I pull into question. Because...
Well, I can show you a government official, I forget his name, from...
Somewhere in Kazakhstan?
The 20-odds, I think, in an interview talking about how the American government was going to use the Ukraine as a football through NATO in order to weaken the Russian government. We can look that up right now and clip it out. So if that's in contest within your understanding of this, maybe we should watch that before we continue this.
So we can do it either way that you want. I don't think it's contingent to my feelings on it. So
okay. I thought that was like a crux of your point.
No,
if it's not, then go ahead.
Yeah,
because everybody watching this who's interested in the subject at all will know about that. So go ahead.
So the thing that struck me about the interview was that, like, I don't think Tucker did a bad job. I think he probably should have interjected more to fact check Putin, but I don't think that that was in his paradigm to do, because it's a situation where I'm sure that Putin's people sat there and were like, here's where we can talk, here's where we can't talk. And even Putin shut it down a few times when he was like, I'm not going to say what that person said, kind of thing. And that seems diplomatic when he's sitting there and like, that's on them to say that.
Agreed.
It seems diplomatic. But
I think other than the filibustering, I thought Putin seemed extremely genteel. And
sure.
the only red flag...
He's very well respected in his country.
And I know. And the only red flag that got sent up in my head during that...
He's also very hated in his country, but...
Well, anybody who gets injected during a press conference and gets disappeared for asking the wrong question probably hates him.
Sure.
But we have our own way of disappearing journalists in this country. It's just not as overt. So the only red flag that got sent up is when Tucker was like, when's the last time you have spoken to the president? And he goes, oh, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. It's the president of the second biggest economy in the world that you're currently at war with. Yes, you do. Shut up. That's such an obvious power move. It's such obviously ego. Yeah, you do. Stop lying.
That's the point.
Stop lying.
But
disturbing to me was that's one of the only red flags. And you know how I kind of pride myself on, if I can't cut through the bullshit with my intelligence, I have a tremendous bullshit detector. So, for example, it's like, straight men say that they have gaydar. I'm the type of person that will know you're gay, but I won't know you're hitting on me until I'm blackout drunk with your dick in my ass. So, there's a disparity there.
I've got a farm nutraceutical for you, but
excellent. I can't wait to hear about it. So what was disturbing to me, because I do pride myself on having at least a bullshit detector. I'm no Jon Stewart in cutting it up intellectually, but I can detect it when I see it.
Well, the information that would be required to incise those kind of things is not stuff that you consume.
Right. Now, there was a certain medical intervention that was going on decades ago, back in the 30s, that they were trying to get everybody to take this medication back in the 30s. And the way that they were going about it, I was like, oh, I'm going to wait and see what happens. I'm not going to do that.
That's why you didn't take it back in the 30s.
Back in the 30s. That's why I didn't take it. And it turned out I was probably right. Time will tell. It's only...
You look very good.
Time will tell. It's only been 90 years. So, it is what it is. So I do have a bullshit detector because I really wanted this medical intervention, but my bullshit detector went off.
Was it an abortion? Because you can't get those anymore.
I just farted. That was fine. It was just gas. So, but what disturbed me about my experience, and I've only watched it once. What disturbed
Same here, literally on the way here.
On the way here. What disturbed me about it was almost no red flags went up.
So for me,
then I'm like, one of two things. There may be other options, but the first way I'm looking at this is one, because I'm hyper self-critical. I put on an air of confidence, granted, but I'm hyper self-critical. You have to be an artist. And I'm like, either this guy is not lying, or I am overestimating my ability to perceive being lied to.
I think it's a combination of the two.
It's most likely the case.
Because he's
KGB.
Very high-ranking
KGB. Yeah. So, holy shit, if that guy was not being honest most of the time, most of the time, he got through my filters, like 90% of that interview. I'm like, this guy's good.
Yeah, and that's the entire thing is like,
or just as disturbing, he's telling the truth.
Sure. The things that I'll take umbrage with from the interview, and the funny thing is that having not seen the interview and everything, I thought I was going to take umbrage with Tucker Carlson just because I don't like the guy. But he really played a non-part in the interview for the most part. He was just letting Putin ramble. And Putin's history lesson is accurate, but it's one of those things where he's using it to justify something very strange, in my opinion. And what it seems like he's trying to justify is like, okay, I'm invading Ukraine for their own good. And
oh no, did he say that? That's not what I took away from it.
So that's the subtext that I took away from it.
I didn't get that at all.
All right, so let me explain my position.
It's like NATO's putting my back against the wall, and I already told you that's the line, so here's what I have to do.
Sure, but the point of the history lesson that he gives is to talk about how Ukraine is basically theirs anyway.
It's like, the way I look at it is it's Canaan in the Bible. Everybody says the Israelites. Whoa, wait a second. Everybody says that the Israelites escaped Egypt, then they went to the Promised Land, which was Canaan. And God told them slowly but surely, hey, kill every other nation that's on this land, it's yours, and take it over. That's the way the Bible says it. In history, what most biblical scholars think happened is there's no evidence of the Jews ever being in Egypt, and the Israelites were just one other ite from the land of Canaan. And what Putin was saying about the Ukraine seems to be on par with like that version of the story. You know what I mean? Like, its border has been in contest for a long time. They used to be parts of these people. They speak both languages.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's just a line in the sand geographically, but
so this may be a false equivalence, but here's the thought that popped into my head, and you tell me if I'm being disingenuous with this, because I'm saying it in good faith. So let me know what's wrong with this.
Okay.
To me, I started thinking, okay, let's compare his argument to other nations who have had this kind of geographical situation. So it's like we have a segment of our country that's called New England. And let's say that what ends up happening through some kind of circumstance is that England ends up annexing New England and coming in and invading it and sitting there and being like, well, these are our people. They're genetically like us. They speak the same language. They speak English. And, you know, at some point during the wars over the centuries, this land was given to America, but it's not really American land. It's not American people. It's English people in English land. And would that then be okay for England to come over and annex Maine, New Hampshire, Boston, all of that because it's New England?
Of course not.
And that's where I was. Is that a false equivalency or
no? And once again, I have to watch the interview again. I've only watched it once.
I know. I've watched it more recently than you have, yeah.
But that wasn't my takeaway
okay.
from the interview. My takeaway was more like the Cuban Missile Crisis. And how would America react? Well, exactly the way we did. So that's.
Oh, and I'm not saying we don't do dirty deals.
Well, hang on a second. That's the equivalence that I think that was more of my takeaway from the interview was, hey man, you had Soviet missiles on your border, you reacted poorly. Now I have NATO missiles on my border, I'm reacting.
Sure, and that's
and it's to be expected, and it was done on purpose. And so, I mean, everybody knew this was going to happen.
See, the annexing of...
And he didn't say that. That's my...
I know, it's your interpretation.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the viewers, the non-viewers. But to me, it's, okay, so you annexed Crimea because of a dispute that was happening back in 2014.
Well, let me stop you right there. If we're going to get into highly specific or historical or the nuanced parts of the interview, I don't really think that's a good place for us to take this conversation. The bigger takeaway, because I am not a history buff,
nor am I.
I am not keeping up so much with this conflict. I'm looking at it through the lens of, here we go again. And I found it almost exciting that somebody in our media landscape had the balls to go do that without the fear of being called a Putin apologist, which has been largely
and you had brought that up before. The people are throwing around the term Putin apologist.
Hillary Clinton seems to be throwing it around more than anybody else, but it is a phrase that's repeated on the legacy media news all the time. It's kind of up there with Nazi, fascist.
But he's calling people Nazis and
racist.
Fascists to justify his invasion. That's
the
thing that's weird.
So that was another red flag. Because he kept bringing up the point that there are Nazis in the Ukraine. He's
using that.
He's obviously using that
obfuscating
in order
true intent,
in order to ingratiate himself into
I'm just fighting
the media,
Nazism, guys.
The media and the political atmosphere that America's in right now. Obviously, so that was another red flag I got from him. Is like, why does he keep bringing up Nazis? It's like he's trying to convince us he's fighting Nazis.
He was painting a picture, and the picture that
that was another. And so you saw that.
Yeah.
I remember I saw that too. Yes, that was the second red flag.
So to me, the weird thing about the interview was that it was a history lesson, and the history lesson, the point to me that it seemed like his history lesson was giving is that, hey, like guys, Ukraine is Russia. And we gifted them this land, and then they got corrupted by outside powers and Nazism, so we've got to take it back.
Yeah, that wasn't my takeaway.
Oh, like, the only reason why it's my takeaway is because he hammered home so hard.
The Nazi thing was a red flag.
About the Nazism, and then also about...
Okay, you know what? If I see a red flag, I disregard that information. Maybe that's a processing flaw that I have. So that I saw red flag, that's bullshit. You're doing propaganda right now, so I disregard that information, and that does not come into play when I have a takeaway. You know what I mean?
No, I got you, but to me, like, anytime there's a red flag, it's like, okay, let me taint the rest of your information with that red flag.
Oh, I don't do that.
And maybe it's a bad practice, but it's like I
don't know which one's better.
I don't know either. But it's like, to me, that as a skeptic, that's generally what I do, is whenever I see a red flag.
Well, that's why you're so into personalities. You're just like, I don't like Tucker, so this interview's probably horrible.
And it leads you
so it leads you into a place where perhaps you ought not to be. Perhaps
I agree.
Perhaps my method's a little better, but I'm not even sure about that.
Because it could go either way.
It's interesting the difference that you and I have with processing bullshit and what to do with the bullshit.
And the funny thing is that we're both...
I flush it, you spread it over the rest of...
Yeah, I'm like, hold on. If you're going to say that, then that is...
Sorry. Talking head, nobody's 100% virtuous and honest.
Of course.
So everybody would just be 100% bullshit by that reckoning, right?
I understand that, but what I'm saying is that it's not that everything that you say is discredited by this little piece of bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
It's this piece of bullshit needs to be dunked in everything else you say to understand, because if you're going to lie about this specific thing.
This is interesting. Now I know why you hate Alex Jones so much.
Yeah, because if you're going to lie about this specific thing, I have to question your motives for lying about it and spread those motives, not unilaterally, because Alex Jones, again, was right about a lot of stuff.
A lot of shit.
But I have to at least keep in the back of my head that you did this and I don't know why.
Oh, absolutely.
And so me not knowing why.
But maybe this is the difference. I know why he said that.
Which part of what?
The Nazi thing.
Okay. It's the
I know why.
Yeah, okay,
So is that the defining characteristic of spreading somebody's bullshit into other areas of things that they're talking about? Is that you don't know where it's coming from?
No, it's
Does
not.
that create a fear reaction to their information?
No, it's to try to understand the motivation of everything. And it's not about painting it with a broad brush. It's about, like, hey, did the Ukraine used to belong to the USSR? Yes, definitely. They weren't their own nation. They spoke primarily Russian, like he said.
Well, the Soviet Union was a lot like the European Union. It was a group of individual states, right?
Yeah, and on top of that, it's the entire thing that, like, because of the border redrawings, like he was talking about after wars, because once a war ends, your country gets carved up. If you're on the losing
well, that's what
end of
happened
the war.
in Germany. That was the Berlin Wall.
Yeah, and they talked about Transylvania. They talked about Hungary.
Yeah.
That's what happens at the end of a war.
Okay.
And the question ends up becoming is like, okay, well, which lines are the lines that matter?
Well, once again, let's not get too far into the specifics. I'm more interested in the broader conversation, and right now this is interesting me quite a bit. Is what you do when you see bullshit. So
what I do when I see bullshit is like, okay, you said something that is either patently false or obviously slanted in a certain way. It's like, okay, so that's part of the narrative. Because I'm looking at it as a narrative just like you do.
He's telling a story.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, well, how important is that? Because that's the blatant lie. So if that blatant lie has to come through, because you're only going to lie as much as you need to. So to me, it becomes, that's a key point to it.
I don't feel like American politicians practice that. I feel like they just tell outright stories.
At this point, I'll have to acquiesce.
Yeah, like Putin made me feel comfortable. I was like, this is what politicians were like back in the 90s.
Yes, and he's a very snuggly...
Made me feel warm and
He's
fuzzy.
a very snuggly murderous politician who kills media people who dissent against him. And I
was like, oh, you're the evil I know.
Oh,
thank
the
you.
Evil I know.
Thank you for coming back into my life.
I missed the Cold War.
But I want to get back to this. This is interesting how you distribute bullshit in your conception of your information intake. I think this is important. So we're going to come back to that in a second. Harry, I know that the reason why we didn't put headphones on you this episode is because I remembered in the previous podcasts you were talking over yourself a little bit because there's a lag in the headphones. Yeah. And I know you're probably not hearing everything we're saying, but
catching most of it.
Okay. So you and I watched the Putin interview with Tucker Carlson together.
Yeah.
What were your takeaways from that interview?
First of all, let's understand one thing. Carlton was supposed to work for the CIA at one time.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting.
Is there any possibility that there was some influence from the CIA for his interview?
Well, just the fact that was a career choice for him before he ended up as a media personality is very telling about where his interests lie.
Right. He may have had a connection. Putin is fighting for his country. He don't want NATO all around him, so he's like one man standing against a group of people. All right?
Right.
So he's hard. If we want to go back to the old history, we want to go to Prussia, you want to go 1844, you want to go there, you want to go into Germany and Poland. All right, they're one nation of people.
Right.
But they got divided up.
Okay.
Like this country's divided.
Yeah.
Right. So therefore he's fighting for his country. Is he right? Is he wrong? Or is it that we're interfering with their country and trying to take them down, and they're only defending themselves?
Right.
Now, when Patton was in World War II in 45, and he said, well, we got the son of bitches right here, why don't we just send them back to their border? Well, he was talking as a military man, a military victory. But all wars are about economics.
You remember that line from the movie The Good Shepherd with Matt Damon? World War II is over, and Matt Damon's handler, Matt Damon is head of CIA counterintelligence during World War II. And I think it wasn't even called CIA at that point, but that's the movie, OSS. His handler comes to him and meets him. It's a covert meeting. And he says he's introducing Project Paperclip to Matt Damon's character.
Right.
And he says, I think it was Patton. He says, Patton was right. We should have kept marching straight to Moscow. Now we're in a war for the free world.
50 years.
Yeah.
But we gave him $11 billion worth of military equipment
Who?
to fight. What? Us, the United States.
We gave who?
Russia.
Okay.
$11 billion in war equipment to fight Hitler, to squeeze him.
Right.
I don't know if we ever got paid back on that.
I don't know.
So that's one of those.
That's a good question.
That's one of those weird things that comes up because of the Cold War. And as far as my understanding is, and I could be wrong on this, because again,
if
there's
you're gonna,
so much
he doesn't have. You
propaganda.
got to talk up a little.
Yeah, so there's
Just
so much
pull back.
Yeah. There's so much propaganda in the situation. But the thing is that you have to remember that the reason why we did Project Paperclip is because Moscow beat us to Berlin.
Right.
They're the ones who actually sat there and sacked Berlin. And we were nervous that they were going to emerge from the whole situation more powerful than we did.
Sure.
Plus,
Well, that also, arguably, that's the reason why we dropped the nuclear bombs on Japan. Because that was a dick-showing contest between us and Russia, right?
Yes, it was, because the Russians, the Germans had the atomic bomb in 43 with the heavy water in Norway. All right, the Russians were working on the atomic bomb.
The Japanese
We beat
almost
them
had
to
it too, actually.
Yeah, I heard that.
We didn't want to invade Japan because it would have cost us too many men.
We did invade Japan.
So
It
the
cost us many
nuclear,
men.
the atomic bomb.
Well, he
was to
means
show
the
us
mainland.
strength. But the thing is, it was a big gang war, and we were the biggest gangster. So
Right.
we won the war against Japan. The Japanese would never surrender. They would fight to the last child.
Well, I've heard a different interpretation of that, where within it was obvious to analysts that Japan was about to surrender.
And we did it as a show of
We
bravado,
dropped the
yeah.
atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki as a show of force to come up the preeminent superpower in the world because we were nervous about Russia taking that title for themselves.
Yes, they were going to take it.
Yeah. So that I've heard that.
Because by all accounts, Russia won the European conflict.
Oh, 100%.
Like if it was
If
not
it was
for
not
Russia,
for Russia, Russia laid down how many soldiers in
Millions.
that conflict?
Yeah.
So many more than we did. So many more than we did. It's crazy how much blood they shed for that conflict. Crazy.
And that was the whole thing, is that they had decisively won the European
Stage.
thank you.
Theater.
Theater. There you go. That's the word I was looking for. They had won the European theater, and we were like, okay, well, we're going to take the Pacific then.
And then from what I've heard, dropping those bombs on Japan was just a dick-waving contest to intimidate Russia.
Well, if you even look at like why Vietnam happened, that was all about fucking dick waving with Russia. And the Korean War was all about dick waving with Russia.
Arguably, the Ukraine is all about dick waving with Russia, except right now it's not just the U.S., it's the North American Trade Organization.
I will say, there's a major difference between the Ukraine and Korea and Vietnam.
What's the major difference?
The major difference is that Korea and Vietnam were both experiencing civil wars that we intervened in. Ukraine has been invaded.
Okay, I see your point. Now, it is a point of terms, and that's probably where Putin was coming from with his history lesson.
Propaganda stuff.
He sees it more as a civil war.
Exactly. And he framed it as such.
And we see it as an invasion on a sovereign nation, which we do all the time. So there's no moral high ground. But I see
there's not a moral high ground. But
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. And that's where you saw propaganda. I see a different take on a story. I'm not necessarily seeing propaganda there. That didn't raise a red flag for me. That part of the interview, I was like, that's the way he sees it. Got it.
Or at least that's the way he wants other people to see it.
That would have waved a red flag. I think he legitimately sees it that way.
There's a possibility that he may. He seems to be a very patriotic person for his country.
Really does. Isn't that weird?
No, it's not weird to me. He's KGB.
It's weird to me. I live in America.
Yeah, but he's KGB.
There's nobody in power in America that's patriotic.
But the people in the FBI and shit and the CIA and the military are, hey, the people at the mid to ground level are extremely patriotic. Okay,
all right, granted.
And he ended up at a high-ranking place.
Yeah, but the people in America who are extremely patriotic, it's never the cream that raises to the top.
I hear you, but
that's just not the system we have.
Sometimes it happens. Patton was a fucking ground soldier.
I don't mean back then. I mean,
I'm saying
shit's changed here so quickly. Well, but
over the last back century. Then guy, not World War II back then, but he's a back then guy.
I got you. You know? Shit here changes so rapidly.
Oh yeah, there's nobody who has allegiance to shit apart from the soldiers on the ground here. Like
and capitalism's partly to blame for that.
Of course,
we have no allegiance to anything other than fucking profit and
the almighty dollar.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
That's a good question. Why is the FBI destroying over 280 documents from January 6th? Their films, the documents, they're destroying them.
It's interesting.
And the Department of Justice is turning a blind eye to it also.
I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent with the January...
The thing is, you cannot trust government agencies.
Correct. With the January 6th thing, but my leg's cramping up. But I will say that what's going on with January 6th strikes me in a similar fashion to a covert intelligence operation. It does seem to, whether or not it was orchestrated by what do you call those?
Intelligence
infiltrated
agency.
Bad actors.
Insurgents?
No. It's like we had FBI coaxing people inside to make it happen. There's a term for that. Whether or not it's a crime of a premeditated crime or a crime of opportunity, the way that that's being handled seems to be very strange to me. I will say that.
I would like to see the American people protest like they do in Spain, Germany, and France.
Speaking of which, this is fantastic. I think it's Germany. The farmer protests have won for now.
I think it was the Netherlands.
Is it the Netherlands? No, I think the Netherlands are still having protests. I think it was Germany.
Maybe.
I could be wrong. But some European country, the farmer protests,
yes,
they won. They got the government to stop all that bullshit regulation that was going to make growing food less profitable than it is now, almost impossible to do without government takeover of the land that they're on. They won. There you go. And France, every time the government does anything
people shit on France so much in this country.
The people there are so hardcore.
Fucking,
they're so hardcore. their prime minister wants to raise the retirement age by like
and they were like
8
fuck
years
you.
or
They
something.
went on strike, yeah.
Oh my God. They were like, nope. And the government backed down.
Because they had their revolution after ours.
I don't know what the reason is. Why do you think, why are you considering that the reason why they're just so much more aggressive against their government than Americans are?
So I think that they've got a longer history than we do. And they have a history that involves a landed gentry. They have a history that involves peasantry. They have they've got England's a weird situation because the monarchy in England understood that they needed to acquiesce to the people, and they're one of the few monarchies that did, and that's why they still have a monarchy.
Yeah, they're like one of the only ones left.
Because their rulers were like, this is going to get fucked up if we don't let the people have a voice.
Also, who is the main organization that took out the monarchies in the late 19th, early 20th century? The main organization that took out all the monarchies. The Freemasons. They took them out. And guess who is a prominent member of the Freemasons over there in, he's the current King of England.
Oh, King Charles.
Oh, yeah, he's a Mason. So there you go.
But my point being is that when the French Revolution happened, there were two things that were major points that happened with the French Revolution. One, it was on the coattails of our revolution. And two, their monarchy supported our revolution. And that's a weird state to be in because you have the common folk who are paying for a war overseas for a revolution against a monarchy, and then they end up in dire financial and economic straits because of supporting that overseas revolution. Like, yeah, that's going to be a fucking powder keg for your people if your monarchy supported a revolution against England for the colonists in America as a proxy war against England, and then now you're suffering because of those debts, and America didn't come back to help them. Because the French monarchy asked America in its infancy to sit there and intervene in the French Revolution on the side of the monarchists.
And of course, we were run by Freemasons, so they weren't going to do that.
We weren't going to do it because A, we didn't have the money, and B,
we didn't believe in monarchy. Yeah. So what's your point as to why the French are just so much more vigilant and aggressive against the malfeasance of their government?
They didn't have help, so they know it's entirely up to them.
That's a point. I'm not entirely sure it's a good one.
I'm just saying it might,
but it's a point.
It might be something that molded their national character because France intervened. We would not have won the Revolutionary War without the French monarchy.
So listen, history is his story, and that's usually something that's used by feminists, but it is his story.
And it's also used by Michael Jackson. It's fine.
What?
It's also used by Michael Jackson. It's fine.
That's his story. So it is a story. And in America, our story is
we pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps.
The plucky pioneers took on the biggest military in the world at the time, and won probably because the intervention of God saw that our
cause was just and righteous.
Yeah, that's our story.
That's our narrative. Yeah,
yeah, it's a story. So I'm not really sure how their perception of the story. They probably have the same story.
No, so here's and I took French, so I know a little bit about French history just because of having. It's not a qualifier. I'm not qualified.
Then
I'm not
why
arguing.
Say it?
I'm not arguing. My point is that I learned certain things just by taking French.
Okay.
So, and here's my interpretation of what it probably is that was in the national character, and any French person can sit there and please tell me I'm wrong. I'm curious to learn because I always am. But if you have a group,
Yeah, leave it in the comments.
yeah, exactly,
Like, subscribe,
Yeah.
comment, follow. Thank you.
But so if you have a situation where your country, like, so it's us in Ukraine, so we're funding the war in Ukraine, and people are getting angry about it. Imagine if right after we helped Ukraine win the war against Russia, all of a sudden we had a civil war. And we were like, hey, Ukraine, we just helped you. Like, we need your help now. And they're like, yeah, no, fuck you.
Okay.
And then, so now you're put in a position where it's like, okay, so we put all this money into you guys, and we're having a similar issue.
I get it, but you're still not drawing a definite connection between that story and why the French population now in 2020, the 2020s, and the 20-teens are so much more aggressive against government malfeasance than the American population is. I'm not seeing it.
We didn't behead our oppressor. They did.
Okay.
Like, no, I'm just saying, like,
so that's a characteristic that's already there. That's not because of what happened.
So I'm not drawing any direct line. I'm just saying I think that their cultural inclination is slightly different than ours, just because they fought so much harder and more aggressively for theirs and had to do it as a populace, and then had to deal with the quasi-tyranny of Napoleon.
They've just always been like that.
They're
great.
They are the winningest country.
Why were they such cunts during the Nazi invasion? What happened with that?
Oh my God, what are you talking about? The French resistance.
Isn't the cheese-eating surrender monkey a paradigm that we all have about the French? Isn't that, like, kind of justified by the way they reacted to the Nazi invasion? Or is his story completely wrong on that?
His story is very wrong on
All right, educate me.
So,
what happened with the Nazis?
What's the name of the line? There's a line that has a name. So after World War I, or during World War I, there was an area between Germany and France called No Man's Land that they built a series of buttresses and cannon encapsulations around. So because they were fending off the German invasion, because France is the borderline to Germany. So they're the ones who were getting invaded during World War I. And they ended up having to go through Belgium and all of this other stuff. So the whole thing is that France was fighting the World War I, the Austro-Hungarian, because it wasn't the German forces.
I got you. Yep, good. Germany.
So the Austro-Hungarian forces, France was the front line against them. They always are.
Mm-hmm.
And so what ended up happening is they got invaded by Germany, and their government acquiesced to prevent the people dying, and then the government got directly involved in the resistance against the Germans.
Okay.
So they had to politically acquiesce to the invasion to prevent the death of their citizenry.
Okay.
So surrender monkeys, is
so you're saying
it was tactical.
So you're saying during World War II they didn't fight because they didn't want people to die?
They fought initially. They were overwhelmed.
Okay.
They sat there and they made their political surrender to Germany to stop the carnage against their people. And
because they didn't have a standing army, or
they did. They were overwhelmed.
Just not enough.
Yeah, it just wasn't enough.
Okay.
Germany's war machine was very on point.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, Blitzkrieg, all that. Okay, all right.
So, but they fostered the French resistance, which sat there and was like actively murdering and bombing Nazis within their own borders, and
no, they still had, French nationalists that were doing covert intelligence operations and everything all throughout World War II.
Yeah.
They didn't just, it's not like the citizenry just laid down, but they did politically surrender almost immediately.
You know what? I don't think I know enough about it to have this argument.
Okay. Yeah, you brought like World War I, and then without even saying something about World War II, now we're talking about World War II. That whole thing was a little strange to me. Are you trying to give me a 30-second history lesson?
The last 2 hours, yeah.
In Russia, history teaches you. That was the best headline that I saw about the Tucker interview.
In Russia, history
In Russia, Putin interviews you, or something like that. I was like, oh, snap.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
So thank you for your tangential history lesson there. I learned a lot. All right, let's cut this one a little short. I was expecting to have more of an argument with you, or
about
disagreement
we can argue if you
with
want.
you. No, I'm good. I was expecting us to disagree a lot more on Tucker going over there and doing it, and it seems like, from your point of view, it's like, yeah, somebody needed to do it. I just wish it wasn't him.
Yeah, and that's really my take
and then
on it,
also saying, I don't think he did that bad of a job.
Yeah, I don't feel like Tucker did much of anything. I mean, he didn't really push him back on anything.
Let's get some information. And I think, as a journalist, most important thing to do.
See,
and he was in a precarious situation.
Well, and then I guess the thing that we could get back to, if you want to, is there's that little bit of poop.
Oh, that's right. Yep, we can do that. Go ahead.
I want all the people that is listening to this, or look at it, please send us comments, good, bad, or indifferent.
We prefer the bad ones.
Well, whatever we get, please send comments. We don't want to be talking to the air and getting no response. We need your comments.
Yeah, we're idiots and we're drunk. Educate us. Obviously, he's ahead of me tonight, but we're all drinking. Let's take a quick pee break, and then I want to get back to the poop. Where's the poop?
Sure.
Where's the poop? Talking,
Robin? Where's the poop?
Where's the poop, Robin? Exactly. All right, we'll be right back.
So where's the poop?
Where's the poop? So we were talking before, and I thank you for reminding me. I think this is an interesting conversation. We were talking about when it was obvious Putin was lying a couple times. I think we both sensed the same red flags that we can remember. And you brought one up that I had forgotten about. I was like, what was it again? Do you remember?
Was it the trying to expel Nazism
out of the Ukraine? So he's like painting himself in a noble light with the American left, which is a very strange thing to do. You're not going to win them over, motherfucker. Stop trying. But then we were talking about how now that you have seen that shit come out of his argument, which is obvious bullshit, you maybe have a tendency to spread it around. And I was like, oh, I don't do that at all. I just delete that information, or I said that first. I delete that information from what gets alchemically boiled down to my takeaway from the thing that I'm witnessing. And I just cut it out. And you said that you dip. I think the metaphor you used was any other glass of water he gives me, I dip the shit in it before,
just to see if it distills into that glass of water.
Right. Yeah. So, and I was like, oh, now I understand why you hate Alex Jones so much. Now I think I understand why you can just hate a personality. And it completely, it either taints or causes you to out of hand.
It certainly colors it, yeah.
Or out of hand disregard anything that they say. And I was like, well, that's definitely not the right way to handle bullshit. But then I was questioning the way that I handle bullshit, cutting it out from the information that I'm processing in order to distill a takeaway. I'm not sure that's the best way either.
I think both of them have flaws.
Because I think that mine might be better.
Okay.
But I'm certain that it could be weaponized against me. I haven't figured out how exactly yet. Because in principle, what I'm trying to do is cut out sincerity from insincerity and putting them into two different camps.
Sure.
When you see insincerity, you're painting the face of the mouthpiece with that insincerity. A priori
yes,
of... whatever else it's saying.
But I do try to take great care to not disregard fact because of that.
I don't believe in fact.
Sure, so that makes an additional hitch to it.
So the way that a personality forms trust, in my perception, is, are they saying things to me that I have not considered? Are they giving voice to something I felt but haven't been able to intellectually articulate? Like Satanism. I read the Satanic Bible when I was 16, and the way that I felt about Anton LaVey's writing was, I felt that way my whole life. I was never able to.
This is giving voice to my
the way
personal
I feel.
Expression. Yeah.
And there are a couple other reasons why I'll trust a voice, but saying something that's narrative driven or inaccurate, or where they're obviously being insincere for a very specific reason, has never made me discount something out of hand. So what I'm doing is I'm disassociating the mouth from the things that are coming out of it, and you're not.
Well, I'm sitting there looking at, well, if that's coming out of your mouth, how is that affecting the other things that are coming out of your mouth,
sure,
whether true or not?
Sure. Now, let me give you a good example.
Sure.
Of where I'm coming from. Bret Weinstein said something in his recent Tucker Carlson interview about the Darien Gap and his trip down there with his son.
Which I did watch that as well.
That alarmed the fuck out of me, because you know how much of a fan of Bret Weinstein I am.
Sure.
Bret Weinstein painted a picture in which, YouTube, I'm not saying this, Bret Weinstein said this, okay? I'm not saying this. Bret Weinstein speculated that perhaps the mRNA vaccine could be used as a weapon for germ warfare in the future, because it brings up, according to him, YouTube, not me, it causes the immune system, especially with many boosters, to lay down to this type of to this type of, so it's going to see the spike protein, but it's seeing it so much because your body is manufacturing it with this technology, that the immune system is going to say, oh, okay, this is it's not a threat, this is just something we're doing now. And it makes you more vulnerable to highly specific things, and he's thinking that it's kind of like being allergic to a cat, which is an autoimmune thing, allergies.
Nah, I gotcha.
But if you live with a cat for a few years, guess what stops happening? I experienced this because I had a cat that I loved very much that I rescued, but I was allergic to cats.
I have since eaten it.
Thank you. Now I don't have to care about it anymore. I appreciate that.
No, you're welcome.
I don't like loving things. It's too much responsibility. You live with a cat for a few years, your immune system, rather than continually fighting you, I forget what the thing is called that it brings up. It has a very technical scientific letters and numbers thing, designation, but your body just figures out that it's fighting itself and it stops. So he speculated on the Tucker Carlson interview that perhaps the reason why the forces the forces that be were so gung-ho for this vaccine was because they were attempting to weaken the populace to something else that's about to come up in the future.
See, and this is
now
where...
this is the first time, and Bret Weinstein, to his credit, he predicated it all with, it's just speculation now. We have to be very careful. But with what I've seen from the way these people act, you can't take anything off the table either. You do have to consider all possibilities. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense, because they're capable of way more malfeasance than we gave them credit for, and we were blindsided. But what he said specifically about that raised a red flag, and I was like, oh, that doesn't feel right. Something about that feels wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was his lack of sincerity per se. But then right after I see that, he's on the Alex Jones show. And I was like, just him being on the show, being who he is kind of a red flag. So now I'm saying, oh, you're being politically motivated to build your audience, whether or not that is for sincere purposes. You're now engaged in playing a game. And he's the type of person that goes so far as to reject most of his sponsorship offers because he doesn't believe in the product. And he lets his audience know that all the time. And if you look at the products that actually are on the podcast, you'd be like, yeah, that's obvious. But now he sees that probably what's happening is he sees the situation as being so dire. He's like, okay, we have to take the gloves off. We have to play this game to a certain extent in order to get more ears and eyes on us. So both those things happened within a couple weeks of each other. Both sent up a red flag. So if, as far as we're processing bullshit, I'm not putting a halo around a mouthpiece, and I'm not putting a turd on the head of any mouthpiece. I'm looking at what's happening in the moment.
I gotcha.
Okay.
I'll do the turds on heads.
You see what I'm saying?
I'll do the turds on heads more than I do the halo.
Sure.
But the turds on heads thing that I do is
it's not a scorched earth policy.
Yeah.
I got you.
There's again, Alex Jones was not incorrect about many things that he said. He's been, into my knowledge, more incorrect about things that he said than correct about things that he said.
He says a lot of things.
He does say a lot.
Probably right. Yeah. He's on air for like 3 hours, 4 days a week.
Because that's how he makes his money.
Exactly.
Bret Weinstein was an interesting one because I watched that interview with Tucker Carlson. I watched another one that our dad sent us. And
I didn't. Oh, on Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
That wasn't a great interview. Joe Rogan got really high. And you could tell Bret
very high.
And you could tell Bret was starting to get a contact high because Bret never loses his thought. And he was losing his thought constantly. And Joe was like pulling him around in loops where usually Bret will be like, well, wait a second. I want to get back to my original point.
Yeah.
And he wasn't doing that. And I was like, whoa, I think Bret got a contact high. It was entertaining, but I think his interview with Tucker was far better, but it was entertaining. What are you trying to find?
I'm trying to find a quote.
Oh, okay.
Because I think it was very good.
But as far as bullshit goes, I don't think my system's perfect, but I'm going to pull a quote from who's the guy who was the Prime Minister of England during World War II?
Churchill.
Yeah, I kept wanting to say Winehouse. I'm
Winston
like, that's
Churchill,
not correct. Winston Churchill said, democracy is the worst system that's better than anything else. So, I mean, Bret...
No, he had a great candor.
So, I mean, what I'm saying is that I'm not saying that my filtration process is the best one to disassociate what's being done and what's being said from the person doing it. But I think it's far better, perhaps, than what you're doing.
I don't know, because what I generally do is if you sit there and you say something that I know is patently false and propagandistic, what I will do is I won't taint
Do you mean me personally? Do you mean me personally or people saying things?
People. The royal you.
Okay, thank you.
My initial gut reaction is not to sit there and say that everything you say is now false. It's okay, you've informed me as to what you will lie about.
Well, I think they inform you to their motivations.
But that's what I try to extract. It's like, okay, you've informed me that you will lie about this.
Well, everybody will lie. But when you catch somebody in a lie, what is laid bare
it's
are
what
their
motivates you.
motivations.
Yeah,
Right.
that's exactly what I'm driving at.
Okay.
So I won't apply you're a liar.
Okay.
I will apply you lied about this. So I have to try to understand why you lied about
Correct.
this. And then I will apply that to other things you
that
say.
knowledge, that motivation.
Yeah. And if that motivation doesn't fit...
Oh, yeah. Totally. I do that
And
too.
if that motivation doesn't fit, I'll recalculate.
I'll do that too.
Yeah, so
but I don't.
that's
But I
where
don't
I'm
automatically have a distrust because somebody lies.
I immediately have a scrupulousness, not necessarily a distrust.
Oh, I have that
but I have
automatic
a skepticism.
I have a skepticism
No,
a priori. I have a
skepticism.
skepticism. I have a heightened skepticism a priori,
No, I gotcha.
like as high as it can be. And lying, everybody lies. So
I know.
I'm
Yeah.
just like, okay, yep. Where's your motivation? Got it. And then apply that. Sure, but if somebody's going to say things that are just obviously like, yeah, I'm comfortable with that. That makes sense. I see where you're coming from. I'm not going to allow the fact that somebody just lied to taint how I'm taking that information.
No, but I will allow it to inform how I see what they say. Not to taint it, not to be like everything this person says is a lie,
it
but be like,
doesn't-
okay, so this is their motivation.
Yeah.
How does that apply to what they're now saying that I
might
take as
not.
fact? And it might not. And I try
apply
to
at
be discerning.
all.
Yeah.
If I lie about
I try to be
if I
discerning,
lie
yeah.
about my dick size and then I tell you why apples are great to eat, doesn't matter. The motivation doesn't
Apples
apply.
are delicious and your dick's tiny. I got it.
Exactly. I'm Irish. One doesn't apply to the other. But, if I tell you I have a 12-inch dick and then we measure it and it's like Howard Stern, and then I'm like, hey, the keto diet works. This guy lied about his dick size. Don't do keto. You see where
I got you.
Okay.
And I understand that it's somewhat facetious, but I do try to apply those filters properly.
Okay.
That's my whole thing. It's like, and to get back to Jon Stewart, it's like, I've never had that question about him.
No, me neither.
And
I've disagreed with some things that he
Yeah.
said.
but he's being earnest and he's being forthright.
Sincere.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once again, Trump Stewart 2024.
Just so we can assassinate Trump.
Liars may lie strictly because that's their belief system.
Sure, no, they
and
can
they
believe
have
their
no other
lies.
information to disprove it, or they had never researched it. And when they come up with a new idea and you present it to them and they want to dismiss it, they think they're better than you are. But if they don't research
It's a lot of ego.
the lie is a product of what they're living.
Right.
And if you prove them wrong, the hardest thing for a human being is to admit they're wrong.
Yeah, I have no problem with that whatsoever. I don't care.
So I
am not married to my ideas at all. They are completely, maybe that's because I meditate. I see my body as something I own.
my opinions are malleable. Yeah.
I see my ideas as something like my paintings. I created it. Maybe it hurts a little bit if it gets damaged, but I can go make another one. I don't care.
You can make another body.
How many times have you asked me a question?
Wait, you can make another body?
No. So he asked me once. So here's a good. But he asks me questions like this all the time, and I think that you're generally struck by my honesty.
Well,
Because,
I'm amazed at what you know, I don't know. You got your Bible there, all right? And that man that wrote that book was ahead of his time, all right? My religious training is different from yours.
Right.
But at least I do the background check, and I'll correct myself.
Sure.
Most
Well,
people
that's the
can't.
important. It's the important thing.
It's the important thing.
But no, that's the important thing and I think if there's a thesis to everything that we talk about here, it's that it's important to sit there and actually register what it is that you're being told to think about, how you're being told to feel. These are exterior influences that are being pushed onto your narrative.
Human evolution 2024. Take your hands off everybody else's wheels.
Yeah. So I found the quote finally.
Okay.
So this is from a Russian game. It's made by Russians.
Okay.
But it's a beautiful quote. And it's, "The truth does not do as much good in the world as the appearance of truth does evil."
Ooh. I like that. Oh, I like that a lot.
It's a really great quote.
So maybe, and Salvador Dali said this with his paranoid critical method, I have paid dearly for every shortcut I have had to take. I think that perhaps the reason why I have become a bit of a nihilist and thinking, hey man, nothing I do matters anyway. There's no such thing as truth. Meaning is a projection, which we all know is true, but you still feel it. I don't feel it anymore. I'm so divorced from meaning that there's no emotion there. Perhaps the shortcut that I had to take in order to create such a hyperactive bullshit sensor when I saw everything going down the last 8 years was there's no such thing as truth. Everything is subjective. Everything is dependent upon the story you tell. Everything is stories. Now, that's a nuanced conversation to have, but that's the shortcut I intellectually had to take in order to make sure I could never be had again. Because I was had. And
I would argue emotionally had to take.
Yeah.
Not intellectually.
Oh, no. I intellectually had to make that shortcut.
To govern your emotions.
To govern, exactly.
Yeah. No, I feel that, yeah.
Which doesn't keep them down like a pressure cooker and they're ready to pop until I get drunk. But generally speaking, I just don't feel a whole lot of things. And I think that's really the mechanism of my bullshit detector. You can't get my emotions riled up. It's
except
almost
when you're drunk. Yeah.
Except when I'm drunk. And that's why I drink a lot on the podcast. I want to be animated. I want to have opinions. I want to care about things.
You golem.
Otherwise, you're not going to call Tucker Carlson or a Putin apologist and rile my emotions.
I'll call him a shithead, but I don't expect that to rile your emotions either.
It's not going to happen.
By the way, his full name is Tucker Swanson Peck Carlson, I believe.
Peck?
Like, what a fucking terrible name.
He's super wasp. We all know that.
Oh, yeah. His dad was...
he wore a bow tie, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, the Swanson part of his name is because he...
I don't want to get on a tirade about Tucker Carlson, but go ahead.
I
the Swanson part, but you were going somewhere else that was going to be a long thing. I want to wrap this up.
I was just being silly.
Okay. But what I'm saying is, hey, man, I have paid dearly for building up that bullshit detector. It serves me well, but Harry, you and I have had a lot of conversations about this. Everything's a trade-off. Everything that you get, you pay for in some way.
That's life has to pay price for everything.
Even if it's not immediately obvious. Any power that you gain, just like Dumbledore, and I like to consider myself a sorcerer, every power that he gained in the Harry Potter books, he paid for dearly. And
sure.
Hey, listen, I felt like my survival was depending upon building up the strongest bullshit detector that I could build. The shortcut that I took is experience is entirely subjective. There is no such thing as truth. Everything is narrative. That was what I did. And that cascaded into my emotional barrier. I can't be moved. You can't call somebody a Putin apologist and expect that to sway me. It's not going to happen. You can't call me evil and expect me to go, oh, no, I'm not. It's not going to happen. You can't do it.
Well, and that's the entire thing.
I paid, is my point.
We're all the villains in someone's story.
Mm-hmm. And what's the Marilyn Manson line? Everybody else is somebody else's N-word.
Sure.
That's the point, right?
Oh, yeah. It wasn't as...
Everybody I'm trying someone else's N-word.
No,
I don't have to choose a side.
I was thinking of a different song. Never mind.
Yeah. You pay dearly for doing the things that I do, but I'm not going to say the rewards outweigh the... But hey, man, that's the price you pay. But hey, man, that's the world we live in, and I made a decision
That's
in order
the
to.
price you pay. Leave your heart alone and cast away.
Do you think we can get away?
Just another product of today.
Do you think we could get away with ending this podcast with that song, or do you think that's like heavily copyrighted?
Natural? I'm sure that's heavily copyrighted.
Because we get away with it every single time we do this with Hunter as a horse.
I think we'd probably have to have a video differentiation. So, like,
Well, I'm not going to do the video. I just
play.
want the audio.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is you have to do something with the video.
I'm going to try it and see if it gets a copyright. I'm going to put it on private first because that would be perfect.
But imagine it in the event that it doesn't work. Imagine Dragons Natural.
Let's wrap up this podcast and we'll see if I can put that song on the end of this because that sums it up. And hey, man, any immunity that you want to create within yourself against the world, you do the best you can. I didn't make the world the way it is, and
it's not incumbent on you to change it apart from you wanting to see change.
And I, like everybody else, we're all doing the best we can. And hopefully we'll enjoy this year because I just have a gut feeling that something is coming to an end this year. Some paradigm shift is coming. So hopefully we all enjoy this year. Love the people in your lives. Appreciate it. Be creative or do whatever gives you joy. Enjoy it. And we'll fucking see what happens. We're going to skip Alex Jones this podcast. Is that okay?
Sure, but I was actually going to suggest that myself, ironically. But just to sit there and put it back out there, the quote again is, "Truth does not do as much good in the world as the appearance of truth does evil."
Thank you so much for watching the New World Order broadcast, and just remember, we're watching you too.
Someone is watching. There are strangers